This is going to be so much fun. I am really looking forward to today's live video. You guys, I've got attorney Stephen Stanwood joining me today. He is a trademark legal consulting expert. He's a writer. He's a technical writer. And he's also a really good guy with cool pillows. And that's why Stephen got the nod today because, Stephen, first of all, how you doing? Having a great day so far?
I'm doing great, Mitch. I am having a fantastic Monday out here. I'm a kid from the Midwest, so now that I'm in California, I went outside and I swam today, and any day that I can swim outside in the middle of November, that is it for me. I am good to go.
It's a good day. I noticed that. I'm going to ask you more about what brought you to where you are today in today's world, where you live, what you're doing for a living. But before I do that, welcome everybody. This is going to be an interesting show. We're going to touch upon, for those of you that are watching the news, Rudy Giuliani's Four Seasons Total Landscaping interview. I think they thought they were going to be at this Four Seasons hotel. They ended up being at the Four Seasons Landscaping Company. And they did the interview anyway, Stephen, in a parking lot between a sex toy shop and a crematorium. And we're going to talk about that, you guys, the confusion in the name of your company, your business, and some of the things we're going to be touching upon. And by the way, you guys, share this out, hit the share button. Ask your questions to Stephen live during the show using the comments, okay? This is going to be good stuff. Some of the things that Stephen's going to be sharing his thoughts about, giving you some tips as a business owner to pay attention to are, what's a trademark and do we need trademarks in our business? What's the difference between a trademark and some of the other intellectual property symbols that you see? You'll see a TM, you'll see a copyright and things like that. We're going to touch a little bit upon that. How long does it take to get a trademark? What's the best way to start the trademark process off? Can you trademark a phrase? Can you trademark a slogan, right? What are some things that you want to take into consideration when it comes to those types of things? How long does it take to get a trademark? Do trademarks in the United States work internationally? I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think, Stephen, a lot of business owners aren't aware of when it comes to trademarks. And apparently, if you're doing a big press conference at the Four Seasons, I guess you can be confused between a landscaping company and a beautiful hotel and resort property, right? So I guess trademarks in the name of our companies have something to do with the success that we have in life. So now that I've set that up, Stephen, do us all a favor. Let us know a little bit about you. Where are you from? What made you decide to become a lawyer, and why are you focusing in trademarks?
Yeah. So I was born in Chicago. I'm the kid of two lawyers. So I'm one of those people who always had it in the back of my mind. Like you tell your daughter, I'm sure, you can do a lot of things with a law degree. I heard that just ad nauseum over and over again as a kid. Thought I was going to do something else for a while. Graduated undergrad, spent time working for some nonprofits and for a campaign. And then I ended up actually living and working in Washington, D.C. And once you're in D.C., you basically can't walk down the block without passing, half a dozen lawyers. So the advice I got from everyone there was, law school is truly the next step if you want to have any sort of involvement in a legal job, obviously, but also policy and all these other things that I was interested in. So took the leap back. Managed to meet my wife along the way, which is how I ended up back out in California. Knew I was interested in the internet and intellectual property generally, and then really zoned in on trademark law during law school. Got out, worked for a firm for a while, and launched my own thing, which is all trademark law all the time, just about a year ago. So I've been having a great time doing that.
Okay, two things real quick. Your mom and dad, you said, were lawyers. What type of law do they practice? And with respect to the new launch that you initiated a year ago, tell us a little bit more about that and what you do.
Yeah, so they were both big firm, great brand name firm, corporate lawyers. My mom did mergers and acquisitions for a while. My father had a wonderful career as a corporate tax attorney for a variety of different companies along the way. And I don't know, part of the narratives that we build around our lives, I think, have to do with what we do relative to what our parents do. So I'm very thankful to them for, imparting upon me that going to law school was something that I could do and that would be valuable and that would be a really wonderful experience. But at the same time, there's also tension within that because I didn't just want to go down the same path that they went down. So that's how I've sort of swung to the other side of the pendulum and ended up in this wonderful small firm world, helping a lot of small businesses and solo entrepreneurs and creative people out there doing creative things and just making it work for themselves. I really, really loved that niche, and I didn't even think it was something I'd ever do, 5 or 10 years ago.
And you're doing it so well. You've got a lot of fans already. I'm looking at comments. You guys, thank you. We'll get your questions in here. I'm not sure who this is, but you've got a fan out there, and I just wanted to share this with the world. So thanks for the comments, you guys. This is awesome.
That is amazing. Obviously, social media has been a huge part of my practice, and I've just been totally blown away by how kind people have been to me on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Thank you, anonymous Facebook commenter, for saying that I'm the man. It's just awesome. And if you put yourself out there, I think that there's just so many benefits to it and so many people that you can meet, like obviously, this happening and talking to you today, it's just happenstance.
It's awesome. This is what makes practicing law, I think, fun, is having these channels to chat with. And for those of you who are joining us on the different Facebook platforms, there is a link when we're using StreamYard, where if you click that link, it'll tell StreamYard to pull up your profile picture and let us know who you are. So just pay attention to that, because we do want to know who's here and who's sharing their questions on social media. But listen, Stephen, there was something interesting that happened, and Giuliani and his team booked a press conference at the Four Seasons, and they were confused. They ended up at the wrong spot. I'm guessing it was a mistake. I don't think it was on purpose. And I think that kind of raises the importance of business owners understanding when their name is used. Do they have the right to use a name? How can they protect the name? How can you avoid confusion in the consumer's mind? I mean, what did you think about the whole press conference thing from a trademark perspective? Did that raise red flags in your mind also?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of my favorite parts of trademark law is that you can't go a week without seeing some example in the real world of actual confusion that is out there. And the short story about trademark law is that it's all about confusion all of the time. And this is a story where obviously there was confusion. The president was confused. Rudy was confused. Everyone on Twitter was confused. I was confused. You were confused.
Didn't Donald send a tweet out, right? Press conference at the Four Seasons.
Press conference at the Four Seasons. He sends out the original tweet. And then things happen pretty quickly after that. I think the hotel, to their credit, gets ahead of the story and says, no, it's not us. We're not sure what's going on. So that prompts a follow-up tweet from the president that says, oh, no, it's at Four Seasons, total landscaping, which nobody had ever heard of, but people would
do now
need to Google right away and say like, okay, that's a thing that exists, right? And then, it just sort of explodes from there. Obviously, there was some sort of logistical wires that got crossed in the campaign somewhere. But stepping back, it is sort of the thing that would be avoided if these two companies had totally different names. But
and they didn't. They have similar names. And we have a comment. And by the way, this will be a podcast also, so I'm going to read the comments so people just listening to the recorded version of the show know what we're talking about. The comment is, I never thought about the press conference as a trademark issue. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. And I think Stephen too, and that's why Stephen's on the show. So we're going to go into the legalities of how you pick a trademark, how you can protect it, what you can and can't trademark it, things like this, you guys. But let's not vary too far from this press conference. Four Seasons Landscaping, Four Seasons Hotel. In your opinion, or by the way, we're not sharing legal advice today, you guys. We're just having a conversation. But is there an issue with more than one company using the term Four Seasons, or is that okay? Or obviously led to some confusion on the part of one group of people, which, by the way, have been confused for the last 4 years, but I'll leave that for another live video. What's the deal with that? You got Four Seasons in more than one name.
Yeah, and I think, these are not the only two Four Seasons in our country. There are a ton of businesses out there and a ton of different lines of work that are all named Four Seasons. I do want to talk to that comment for a minute. The idea of not seeing this as a trademark issue, it's sort of the thing where once you have a hammer, you start seeing everything as a nail. I'm a trademark lawyer. I will see trademark issues in virtually anything that involves names and branding. So it can be good to have a lawyer on your side for that sort of thing, because even when something innocuous is coming across like this, you might not think there's anything to it, but who knows? So it's helpful to have those people who just think about this stuff all of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the confusion of the consumer, we can now all understand how this can happen. And it can happen in good faith at arm's length, or it can happen in a malicious and improper fashion. And so we want to talk about that a little bit, but maybe just kind of reset for all of us. What is a trademark? How, as we as business owners, what do we need to look at it through which lens to determine, what's a trademark?
Yeah. So the first thing I always tell people is that a trademark is all about your brand. That sort of gets people out of the mindset of like, what's a trademark and what's a copyright and what's a patent? Because there's a lot of confusion about that, and rightly so. I mean, lawyers talk about themselves as intellectual property lawyers who sort of do all these different things, but they're three totally different areas. I mean, trademark is about brand. Copyright is about works of authorship. So if you write a book, suddenly you're talking about copyright law and not about trademark law. And patents are all about inventions. So you remember like those late night commercials for like Invent Help. If you think of the guy with the hammer, inventing the wheel, that's going to be patent law, and that's a totally different thing, right? But trademarks, brands, and sort of beneath that, we break it down into all sorts of different things. Your name of your company, logos that your company uses, slogans that your company uses, and then you can get into things like colors your company uses in less common situations, smells, the shapes of products. There's sort of an infinite amount of nuance that you can get down to after those three big categories: names, logos, and slogans. But it's all brand all the time.
So you've got a company, you're starting a new company, maybe you're rolling off some new products and services. How do you know, what's the decision-making process with, okay, it's going to be the XYZ company, that's what I'd like to, call my company. What's the decision-making process with, should I check into having it trademarked? Should I trademark it? And what are the steps to get it trademarked?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on the business. So if you imagine, you're a hamburger shop and you're downtown somewhere and your name is something like Main Street Hamburgers, like fine, there are thousands of those businesses all across the US. Trademark registration isn't as much of an option for those people because you're just describing, the street that you're on and the product that you sell, and there are hundreds of you out there in the world, and that's fine. But if you are trying to carve out, a unique brand for yourself, especially if you're selling products nationwide, you really want to have some sort of distinctive name so that people know, what's you and can refer to you and can, speak highly of your product. And in the grand world of the internet that we all now have, most businesses are national businesses in one way or another. So if you can carve out a distinctive brand that just screams you, that's often the way you want to go.
What if you think it's a distinctive brand, but in reality, other companies, other people are using that name, are using that product description, are using that logo or that slogan? How do we find out if it's not really quite that unusual after all, or unique after all?
Absolutely, right? You can do some of the work on your own. Basic, Google around, see what else is out there. You can flag huge red flags right away, early in the process, doing that. Step beyond that, get a trademark lawyer involved. They're really good at searching. They're really good at doing deep searches as to what trademarks are registered, how long they've been there, if the other parties, started using the mark before you, which is a huge problem a lot of the times, because trademark rights, and this is another thing there's a misconception about, trademark rights come from using the mark, using your name in the actual course of business. They don't come from the fact that you filed paperwork with the Patent and Trademark Office. They don't come from the fact that you got your registration certificate. Ultimately, it's going to be about who started using this mark first. So a lot of people will say like, oh, I want to lock down the trademark, or I want to get the trademark before I start doing business. That's sort of putting the cart before the horse. Trademark registration is just more formalizing rights that you already have in that name, in that brand.
So if I do a Google search for the XYZ company and I don't see any hits, and I think to myself, okay, that's what I'm going to call my new company. Am I done as a business owner, and I know the answer to the question, but maybe some viewers don't, or should I dive a little bit deeper to make sure somebody else hasn't already secured intellectual property rights for that name?
Definitely dive a little bit deeper. Don't leave it at Google. Jump over to the Patent and Trademark Office's website. They have a lot of intro videos and some kind of basic stuff that'll give you a grounding in how this whole thing works before you even start talking to a lawyer. And they have their own, registration search system, which is which feels like it's from 1995, but once you get over that, it's fairly robust, and you can get in there and you can get a sense of how common or uncommon this name really is. And hopefully you'll have a sense going in, because if you're just playing on some word that's really common in your industry, or you're, adding an additional letter to a common word or something like that, it's a big country, it's a big world. Probably like somebody out there has had your idea, unless it is something that's just really, really brilliant, which is hard. Naming is incredibly hard, and there are literally naming companies that do nothing but naming and have a hard time of it. So it's hard for us, common folks, just to sit down and come up with something that is truly unique. Truly
unique. It's interesting when we're litigating cases, we're a California, litigation firm here in Southern California. It's interesting how a client will feel like, well, I thought that was my idea, or I didn't think anybody else would ever come up with that name or that concept. And in reality, just because it's new to you doesn't mean it's new to everyone else, right? In the United States or around the world. And as a matter of fact, one reason that we're doing the show is you were nice enough on LinkedIn to answer questions that I had about the Four Season landscaping, total landscaping case. And you found multiple other companies using Four Seasons in their name across the United States, right?
Right. So that's the other side of the coin, is that you don't have to be 100% unique. You don't have to have a string of letters, together that nobody's ever put together before. That's part of the inquiry, and it's a big part. Comparison of the two marks is one of the big factors in all of these confusion tests. But another big factor is comparing what the two companies sell. And that's really the big distinction here in the Four Seasons case. I didn't really give you a straight answer earlier, but prevailing wisdom is that these companies are in such different lines of business. I mean, we have Four Seasons, premium hotel services, and we have Four Seasons Total Landscaping, slightly different mark, but same dominant words, Four Seasons. It's a landscaping company, right? Like, do we really think there's going to be a lot of confusion other than, the actual confusion that we saw in the world on a day-to-day basis? Like, are people going to stumble into one and think they're supposed to be at the other? Are people going to be trying to buy, goods from one but not the other? Like, not really. These things, can coexist in the world, especially since in the Four Seasons Total Landscaping case, there's sort of a meaning to it that there isn't in the hotel case, right? You're a landscaping company. You want to be able to communicate that the work that you're going to do for people's landscaping is going to work for all four seasons, right? You don't get that in the hotel context. So it's slightly different meaning there, even though it's the same words, which is really interesting.
So, but what if somebody is typing in a Google search for Four Seasons and they're looking for a hotel property, but because of the SEO, and I'm not saying this is happening at all, but I could see in some industries, the SEO might steer the person doing the Google search over to a completely unrelated product with that name in it. Talk to us a little bit about trademark rights and SEO, keywords, and Google search. Is there a relationship there?
There is absolutely a relationship. There were a ton of cases, especially in the early days when the internet was first starting to bubble up, about keyword searching and diversion of people exactly like that from one place to the other. One of the big bottom lines is that, you have a huge practical problem if you call your landscaping company Four Seasons Total Landscaping, because whenever someone's trying to Google you, they're going to get all these results for and about the hotel. So that's, a situation you could have avoided, maybe, if you had entered into a less crowded field.
You're right. I mean, actually, it may not work to your advantage, right? To piggyback on a huge guerrilla brand, if it actually dilutes your brand in the local community. All right. So let's say I decide I want to get my trademark done. I've got a great new idea. You've done a search for me and you haven't been able to find anyone else. It's available. Once I start the process, Stephen, how long does it take to secure a trademark in the United States, generally speaking?
It takes longer than you would guess it would. A lot of people think it's basically, filling out a form and sending it off and then you're done. That is not the case. You fill out a form and you send it off, and that's the first step in a process. What happens then is that your application sits sort of idly for 3 or 4 months before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which is where you sent it, even picks it up, even does anything with it. They're incredible people who work at the USPTO and a great core of examining attorneys. But, like a lot of government agencies, it's a process and it takes time. Ideally, they'll pick it up. They'll say, you're good to go. They will publish your application for opposition, which is basically an open call for anybody who thinks they have an issue with this name you're trying to register, to come in and say, no, I oppose this, and now we're going to fight it out and see who has superior rights between the two of us. Once it's published, if nobody jumps in there and wants to duke it out with you, then you get to either a registration certificate right away, or if you applied without actually having used the mark yet, you'll get to what's called a notice of allowance, which says, okay, you're good to go, but show us you're actually using the trademark before we get you that final registration certificate. So from end to end, best case scenario, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Worst case scenario, somebody else jumps in and opposes you. You could be fighting this thing out. You could be calling up Mitch and litigating this thing for years, right?
Call Stephen, you guys. Call Stephen. So if I successfully obtain a trademark on my company name, on my business name, does that prohibit anyone else from using it, or can other people use that trademarked name in maybe different limited circumstances?
They can certainly use it if they're selling something that's far afield from what you're selling. That's the biggest thing that you'll see, is that somebody else will have the name, but they'll be, selling it in an entirely different, distinct area, right? Back to Four Seasons again, hotels versus landscaping, fine, right? Or like computer software versus restaurant services or something. Unless you can make a logical connection that the two things have something to do with each other, there's probably room for both of those things to exist in society. And that's why you see, for a lot of names, not just 2 companies, not just 4 companies, but 10, 20, 50 companies, all using names that are really, really close to each other, but each of which has, carved out this narrow niche. And that's part of where the art of filing a trademark application comes in, is that a trademark lawyer can be the one to help you navigate around what's already there, help write up your application in a way that's going to dodge some of those conflicts, which might otherwise sink your application, 6 months in. There you go.
Yeah, and so here's something that's interesting, though. You just said something that, as a litigator, in my mind, it sounds to me as though if there's a possibility of confusion, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not what the type of law I practice, you may find yourself in court, in litigation, over this reasonable confusion that might take place between the consumers. And then it comes down to how your case is presented. It comes down to who has the best lawyer, who has the best evidence when determining what the outcome of that case is going to be. If I was a judge listening to this, or if I was on a jury, I would listen to the arguments of the lawyer, the evidence presented, and then I would make my determination as a juror, as the finder of fact. It's probably not smart to use a name that's being used by other big companies or corporations, because you might find yourself in that gray area. What are your thoughts, pro or con?
Absolutely. You want to steer clear of people with armies of lawyers, people who, as a matter of course, as an institution, have a process set up for looking for people coming into their space and dealing with them, right? It's been pointed out that in this Four Seasons situation, Four Seasons, the hotel, has a registration for clothing, right? So what happens when Four Seasons Total Landscaping gets all this press and starts selling merch on their website, hilarious t-shirts about this event to sort of memorialize it for the huge number of people out there who would buy that t-shirt for $15 or $20 or whatever it was. What happens, right?
What does happen?
That's exactly the question. And, the answer you get from many trademark lawyers, well, it depends, right? But on a practical level, could Four Seasons lawyers wake up tomorrow morning, walk into court and say, hey, we're Four Seasons, you know us, we're one of, if not, in terms of hotel fame, it's probably the Ritz and then Four Seasons right after that. We are synonymous with luxury hotels. People know our brand. We've spent untold amounts of money building this brand over decades and decades. We have a trademark registration for clothing. Look at this little company selling clothing. Judge, here we are. We're requesting a TRO. We're requesting an injunction. We want this to stop. Like, is anybody going to bet against Four Seasons winning in that situation? I mean,
and I'm not.
The landscaping can hire some scrappy lawyer, go in there, argue the confusion factors, to within an inch of their life. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a huge, well-resourced, experienced company litigating the kind of trademark lawsuit that it litigates all of the time. And they're not going away. They're not going to get tired of this. They're not going to, not want to pay litigation bills anymore because it's just a cost of their doing business, right? So all of a sudden, you, as the smaller company, are in this power dynamic where you have this huge expense, this trademark lawsuit that isn't part of your day-to-day life. And you're probably going to get worn down. You're probably going to move on to the next thing. So that, a lot of times when I'm talking to people, it's as much a question about, is it trademark infringement? Is it not trademark infringement? As it is about the practicalities. Are you going to get on somebody's radar? And if you do, what does that look like for the business realities of what you're doing? And do you want to go down that road?
I see that happening a lot with copyright issues, Stephen, on social media, images, videos, sounds. And even though somebody feels that they have the right to use it under the fair use doctrine exception, or for some other reason, the reality is, and you know this, but I want our viewers to know this, litigation's expensive. Even if you're right, even if you've done nothing wrong, it can cost a lot of money to spend years in court, right, to prove that you're right. And oftentimes, depending on the type of claim, the causes of action, you may not have the right to be reimbursed for your attorney's fees and costs from the other side. Each case is different, so just understand that it's usually best to talk to a good lawyer at the beginning of this process rather than in the middle or at the end of this process. And I've got a friend here that stopped by to say hi. I don't know if you know Pete. Do you know Pete Salsich out of St. Louis, by any chance?
Met Pete very recently, I think. I think we're talking later today.
Oh, really good.
Comment over there, Pete.
So he's one of my favorite guys. He's a musician, but he's also a skilled and gifted lawyer, but he does a lot of IP work. And he's got some very, very well-known clients, movie-related stuff. I don't know what I can and can't see. So when you talk to Pete, make sure you ask him. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that Pete asked a question. And isn't it important that trademark protection is designed to protect the public from confusion, not just to reward the business? Trademark differs from copyright and patent protection in that way. Trademark owners really hold the trademark in trust for the relevant public. And once again, that was for our podcast listeners. Thoughts?
Absolutely. It's all about likelihood of confusion. If the public isn't confused, what are we even talking about here? The fact that businesses get to, fence off some narrow rights to a particular name in a particular industry is secondary to that main goal, that main purpose of trademark law. That is all about the consumers. And I mean, you'll find different trademark lawyers who are all over the spectrum, right? You'll find really pro-business trademark lawyers who are always going to be about rights and say, of course that's infringing behavior, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. We've got the registration certificate. We're the only ones who can use this word, right? To the other end of the spectrum, you'll find lawyers and also lay people who will say trademark rights way overbroad, companies are way overreaching, trying to shut people down just for, saying particular words or using the trademark in not a transformative way because it's more of a copyright frame, but you can find people all over the spectrum. I tend to be towards more of the public interest spectrum. I think that we can get along and that when people, are creative and solve problems together, that's often a better way to go than going down the road of litigation, especially and here's another point I wanted to make that was inspired by something you were saying, Mitch. Trademark law as a system is designed to have every case look different. Literally, the test for whether something is infringing or not is, this huge multi-factor test. Courts can consider this and can consider this and can consider this. So relative to even other types of litigation you can end up in, it's often really unclear what's going to happen to you because of the way trademark laws are designed. It sort of reserves a lot of discretion to the judge who ends up hearing your case, for better or for worse. And that can make litigation really, really drag out. And it also really pushes people to settle. I mean, a huge, huge, huge majority of trademark cases settle. You don't get all the
I didn't
final
know that.
verdict. You don't get this vindication that says, oh yeah, you know, you were within your rights to do that, or no, you weren't. Most of the time, everybody will end up in a room and you'll hash out some kind of deal where maybe you tweak the name, maybe you abandon the name, maybe you both keep using the name, but in distinct ways. So it's the same point Mitch made, where, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you can identify those issues at the outset and you can have that conversation, you know, cool, level-headed, business to business, work out a solution, move on. If you can have that on day one, rather than having that on, you know, day 1,000 of litigating against this person, when you're just going to be over it and you're going to hate paying legal bills and you're going to hate, you know, all the back and forth and all the court appearances and everything. If you can get ahead of that and solve the problem, you're going to be really thankful down the road.
For those of you joining us recently, we are speaking with Stephen Stanwood, who is a trademark lawyer, all-around good guy, someone that's very comfortable with social media and someone you all need to connect with. And we will be sharing his contact information at the end of the show. Talk to me a little bit about trademarking catchphrases or slogans. Can we do that? Is it done? And what are the pros and cons?
If it's your catchphrase, you can do it. If it's a catchphrase that's, you know, out there in the public, in the world, no, you can't. That's the public's, right?
So just do it, for example.
Well,
I happen to know that's trademarked by Nike.
Right. They came up with it. They've, you know, invested a ton of money in building that brand, building that awareness. They definitely have not just one, but I'm sure several trademarks for various word and design variants about just do it. But if we're just in the culture, especially on social media, you know, trends come and go, hashtags come and go. And one of the pastimes of trademark lawyers on social media is watching people unsuccessfully try to lock down exclusive rights to a phrase that just comes up in the culture, right? So I think...
Any examples?
Yes. My arch nemesis, Tom Brady of the New England Patriots until recently, right? Finally got out of the AFC last year and is now a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, right? So as soon as the news breaks that he's not going to be a Patriot anymore, he's going to be a Buccaneer, people start speculating and people start saying things like, oh, you know, here's the Tampa Bay era, right? Funny joke, Tampa Bay, haha, okay? And the first few people who think about that, you know, think it's really clever and think they can get ahead of the curve and think they can lock down trademark rights somehow to be like the person who owns those words. And 99% of the time, it's not going to work that way. In the Tom Brady case specifically, it's not going to work because you don't have Tom Brady's permission and he uses his name, but also it's not going to work because that's not your trademark. You're not using it to sell anything. It's just a word or a collection of words that's out there in the zeitgeist, separate and apart from you. So if you're a business, you have a slogan and you use a slogan, absolutely apply, register the slogan. If you're just watching the news and you're like, oh, you know, that's catchy. You're like, I wonder if somebody's filed that trademark application yet. Save yourself the money. You can set the couple $100s on fire if you want to and file a trademark application, but the office is going to say, this fails to function as a mark. This is just, you know, an informational phrase. It's something people are saying out in the world. It's not even a trademark. And you're going to have a hard time arguing past that, and your application is going to die, and you're going to be like, why did I even, you know, bother doing that?
Well, live and learn, right? You learn we learn from some of the tripping and stumbles that we make through life. And I can tell you guys, even to this day, that still happens to me. That's part of what makes life exciting. But boy, when you can avoid some of these mistakes, especially if they're costly mistakes, that's absolutely the way to go. And that's why I have Stephen on the show today, you guys, is to hopefully give you guys some ideas, some thoughts, some things to think about when it comes to naming your business, protecting the name of your business. One thing I see a lot of YouTubers do, Stephen, is they create their YouTube channels and they build it out and it starts to take off. And then they start creating merchandise that they sell through their channels, which is great. But what I'm noticing is oftentimes on their merchandise are slogans or logos that I've seen before. I mean, it's not original. And I guess my question is, if you properly trademark the name of your company, what are some things you should think about when you start putting that on merchandise, on coffee cups, on t-shirts? Do you need the TM next to it to show the world that it's trademarked? And or if you create merchandise and you don't have the right to use that business name and you put it out there in the world, what kind of problems can you run into?
Right. You can run into trademark problems. You can also run into copyright problems if you take, somebody else's original work and you slap it on a t-shirt. Even if you have rights to use your name, maybe you don't have rights to use a design or a picture or something else you put on there. It can be tricky. It can absolutely be a minefield. Talk about symbols for a minute, because I think a lot of people get confused about that. When do I use the TM?
Please.
When do I use the R? When do I use the C? So the C is copyright. So we'll sort of set that aside. Trademark, you have these two main symbols, the TM and the circle R. The R you can use after you have a trademark registration certificate in hand, and that is your notice to the world saying, this is my name, this is my slogan, this is my logo, it is a registered trademark, you are on notice of that.
So the R is for registered.
The R is for registered. So that's about
officially registered. Okay.
Thing you can do. Nothing requires you to put a circle R next to your trademark as you use it. Nothing, nobody's going to come after you if you use your name, but you don't use the circle R. But if you want to send a really strong message that says, back off, I take my name really seriously, I've already gone through the process of registering it with the trademark office, I know what my rights are because I've put the circle R here correctly, back off, pick a different name. That's the message you send with the circle R. TM is sort of a step behind that. This says, I am using this as a trademark. So that's a little weird, but the shorthand for thinking of it is just, I don't have a registration certificate yet. Sometimes there'll be situations where you have a phrase on your website or something, and you'll have a TM next to it, and that'll be helpful in arguing to the trademark office that phrase should be registrable. Really, the circle R is the critical one. You can slap TMs on things if you want to, but hold out for that registration certificate. Hold off for that circle R if you really want to send a message.
So I may be showing my ignorance on this particular legal area, but am I able to, if I create the name to a company, I think it's unique. I've done my Google search. I've maybe even checked with the official trademark database, and it's available. But I haven't formally applied for a trademark. If I put a TM on it, if I just write TM on it, do I have the right to do that, or do I need permission first?
No, you can do that. Anything you're using. I mean, if it's your name and you're using it in conjunction with selling something, it can be your trademark. This goes back to trademark rights come from use. They don't really come from registration. So lots of companies out there will just use the right.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again? That's key, what you just said.
One more time, slow for the people in the back.
It's good.
Trademark rights come from use of a trademark. They do not come from registration. So
Maria, we're listening to you. Okay.
Hey, Maria. Appreciate
so much to listen to. Yes.
This is where some of this misconception about locking down the exclusive rights to a phrase comes from. You don't do it by filing an application. You don't do it by getting to the trademark office first. You don't do it by getting a registration certificate before the rest of the world does because you're so smart. You get it by building up a business that uses that trademark as a brand. And if you're doing that, especially if you're doing that for 5 years, for 10 years, for 50 years, whether you ever go to the trademark office or not, you are building up rights in that mark, which are going to be, generally speaking, with some exceptions, superior rights to people who start after you.
I love that. It's something that's actually come up with some of my clients over the years. Just so you know, Stephen, before I met you, and I would refer them out to intellectual property specialists who litigate these things. But I'm glad you brought that up because I think there is confusion for a lot of people on whether or not you have rights, even if you didn't formally acquire the registered trademark. And what about when I see like NFL teams or college teams with a company's logo or name on their jerseys? It's just been applied for one game. They're honoring something or they're promoting something or a cause. Do they need permission to do that? They're not claiming it as their own, but they are sharing it on their work product, right? On a Sunday afternoon. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that something you can comment on?
Absolutely. Part of trademark confusion is people being confused about sponsorship or endorsement. So if I slap Mitch Jackson's face on my shirt, like people are going to be confused. Like, does Mitch Jackson endorse this guy? Like, is this an official connection that they have? What's going on, right?
Right.
So especially for the NFL or something as big money as college football, like these things are hashed out. There are lengthy contracts between these parties that generally will go through all of this line by line before this ever happens. For smaller creators, for smaller businesses, a lot of times it's more ad hoc, and that can lead to more ambiguity. I think when you see, something happening on a football game on Sunday, it's pretty well accounted for.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I was curious about that, and thank you for answering my question. So, real quick, I just looking at some questions coming. I guess this is from Periscope. Why don't you like Tom Brady, Stephen? What's the problem? Apparently, there's a Tom Brady fan out there.
Oh snap! Is it a Tampa Bay Tom Brady fan, or is it a New England Tom Brady fan? I don't know.
Is it the team or the player?
I went to middle school and high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is a wonderful, wonderful place, and I'm a Steelers fan through and through. And we are having.
So you're happy right now. Tell everyone why you're happy right now.
Steelers just yesterday won their 9th game of the season and are 9-0, sitting top the NFL.
That's amazing. I'm so glad they've got so many good USC players on their team helping them get there.
Were you born in Southern California? Are you California through and through?
Tucson, Arizona. Arizona. So I grew up without any professional sports teams. The Cleveland Indians would have their spring training out there. And so moving to Southern California back in the early 80s, it was fun being around all of the sports teams and really just enjoying professional sports because we didn't grow up with it. But so I don't have a favorite player, Stephen. I like, I'm excited that Pittsburgh's undefeated. Gronk played at Arizona, which is where I went to my undergrad. So I like watching Gronkowski play wherever he's playing, or his brothers. And that way I'm not that disappointed on any particular Sunday. Every Sunday is a good Sunday, And between Arizona, UCLA, where my daughter did her undergrad, and USC, and my USC, where my son's a junior at USC, and then my daughter graduated from SC Law. Mm-hmm. On any Sunday, I'm probably going to get a W from one of those 3 schools, so it's all good. But let me circle back real quick. One of the questions has to do with if I get a trademark for my business name, how long will it last? That's a good question.
Yep. So the basic answer is it lasts 5 years, and then you have to start filing renewals. And the long-term answer is it'll last as long as you keep using it and you keep filing those renewals.
Okay. So you got to stay on top of the filings. And is that something that a lawyer will do for a client, or is that something that business owners can click in and monitor the status of their filing?
Something that you as a business owner should stay on top of, just because 5 years is a long time. So a lot of trademark attorneys, will get to registration and will then sort of just send a final packet of information that says, here's the deal with this, here's how you keep it alive, things like that, because, who knows where we're all going to be in 5 years, right? Some attorneys who have long, multi-decade relationships with their clients will just keep those things alive for them. But, if you're just sort of working with somebody on an ad hoc basis, you should put however you put a reminder in your calendar for 5 years in the future to circle back and think about that, because otherwise you do risk walking away from that registration.
I think if you put the time and money into securing your registered trademark, you might as well protect it. And towards the end of the show, you guys, we're going to share the services that Stephen does perform for his clients, how you can get in touch with Stephen for follow-up questions, for trademark needs, and frankly, everything in between. Right now, we're all doing business globally, whether we realize it or not. This show is being pushed out not only to California residents, but everyone across the United States, and frankly, everyone across the world in different time zones. We've been talking about registering a trademark and trademark law in the United States. Talk to us a little bit about, if we secure a trademark in the United States, does that, or are there additional steps we need to take to expand that to international and global protection? What are some things that the small business owner should take into consideration? Your thoughts?
Yeah. The short answer is United States is United States, and that's it. Trademark rights are really, really territorial. If you're a small business and you have, a limited budget for these things, which virtually all small businesses do, you really have to prioritize, where am I going to be working? Where am I going to be selling things? Is it 95% the US and 5% other places? Is it 50-50? Because there are some sort of international mechanisms you can use to apply for a trademark registration in multiple countries, but you're often just going to want to focus on the US first, or the US and another country or a couple of other countries. I personally don't do a lot of international registrations, but there are a lot of lawyers who do. And a lot of times you'll affiliate with somebody who is, local to that country, to that jurisdiction, because they know all the ins and outs of that particular trademark office and can get you through to registration if it's important that you have rights not only in the US, but also in China is obviously big, or Japan, or wherever else you happen to be doing business.
Let's say I was I have a surfboard company here in Southern California, and my target market is not only in California, maybe East Coast, Florida, but let's just say Australia and some other great surfing places around the world. Is there a database that I could go to as a business owner to find a good trademark lawyer in Australia, for example, to help me secure that country's trademark and comply with the requirements? Or is it more of just calling someone like you and say, hey, who do you recommend in Australia?
Yeah, I think recommendations will get you a long way. If you're starting from scratch, you don't have anybody to call. You can go to the International Trademark Association's website. They have thousands of different trademark professionals all across the world, and you can sort of end up in the right bucket there.
I like that.
But it's a small world, and trademark people are really connected to each other. So if somebody asked me to find a lawyer in whatever random country, I'm confident that I could go through my network and find somebody.
Well, why don't we do this right now? Because I have a couple of more questions, but I'm seeing, for example, Maria points out that a lot of us are doing business, globally, whether we know it or not, or we're going to be expanding. And this is an important topic. If somebody wants to reach out to you and either ask you some additional questions, or maybe get some help with finding a lawyer in the UK or in China or in Australia, or what databases can you steer me to kind of independently do that? What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you, Stephen?
Yep, I joke all the time that I'm an incredibly easy person to get in touch with, and I've built my business to keep it that way. My website is my last name, stanwood.law, so that's pretty easy to remember, stanwood.law. I also have the domain Lawyer Helping Lawyers, because that's the majority of what I do.
Ooh, I like that.
LawyerHelpingLawyers.com. You'll end up in a Stephen kind of place. Spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, spend a lot of time on Twitter. I'm always happy to message back and forth and to get you, connected with the right person.
And if you guys have any challenges with getting in touch with Stephen, just reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with him. So Lawyers Helping Lawyers. Okay, let's say I improperly use someone else's trademark in my marketing and I get sued and I find myself in litigation. What are some of the things that could happen to me? What are some of the damages I would be looking at for making a bad decision? Even if I'm a good person, I just made a really bad decision and now it's coming back to bite me in the butt. What's going to happen?
Something I wanted to say on this point earlier, and I'm glad that you brought it up again now, is when you're picking a name, if you ever have the thought, like, I'm going to get traction for my business, I'm going to get traction for this name because it trades on somebody else's name, stop right there. Run as quickly as you can away from that name and towards a different name, because that's the stuff that's really, really going to get you in trouble, is when you build a brand with the intent to trade off of somebody's existing good name. There are no shortcuts to building up your reputation. Build your own business, build your own reputation. Don't steal other people's brands. So that's sort of the high level thing. What could happen specifically? All sorts of things. I mean, I said in the total landscaping example earlier, injunctions to shut down things like sale of these t-shirts. That hasn't happened, but it could happen, right? Damages all over the place. It can get, basically as ugly as your.
What do you mean by injunction and damages? Just for consumers that aren't familiar with those legal terms.
That is true. I've been such a lawyer helping lawyers that I'm talking to lawyers all the time. And
yeah.
Damages means you're going to pay a lot of money to somebody else that you do not want to pay. An injunction means you're going to see a court order that says stop doing this, or change your name, or take some other sort of action that you probably don't want to take, because if you did want to take it, you would have done it before it got to the point of being a court order against you.
Good to know. So you want to make sure, you guys, you want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into when you pick a business name. And that's why I wanted to have Stephen on the show today, you guys. Look, here's the thing. It's funny to watch. for example, the press conference that we watched last week, when you see what's going on, some of the memes, some of the jokes floating around. But the reality is, it did give Stephen and I a chance to talk with all of you about, and I have a few more questions. I don't know if you're pressed for time, Stephen, but I've got to.
No, I'm good.
I'll get to your questions, you guys. I'm like, Mitch, answer my question. I'm going to get to your question. Hang on a second. But this is something where what I've noticed, Stephen, is as social media and doing business online, as it's matured over the years, people are not as prone to look the other way and let things go like they did 10 years ago. People are a little bit more serious about, look, if you're doing business, you got to do business the right way. And one of the aspects of doing business online has to do with respecting the intellectual property of other people. It has to do with protecting your intellectual property of your company, and it has to do with understanding and respecting what trademarks are and how they work. I've been practicing law, you guys, for 34 years. I can tell you right now, it's not my cup of tea. It's complicated stuff. That's why I have friends like Stephen and Pete and a few other friends in our community who are my go-to experts when it comes to trademark acquisition and litigation and filing needs. And Stephen, along those lines, tell us a little bit about the services that you provide. If somebody wants to secure a trademark, can they reach out to you and have you do it for them, or what happens?
Yeah, so I know a lot of lawyers who do exactly that kind of work. I'm in sort of an interesting niche. I have the lawyerhelpinglawyers.com thing. I will jump in and I'll help on especially complicated trademark things. I'll write up, complicated legal briefs and get into the real nitty-gritty and things like that. I'll do some coaching at the outset. So I've worked with a lot of small businesses who are just trying to get their feet on the ground under them, who don't really know what the deal is with the trademark process, what they should protect, et cetera. I'll answer basically all the questions that you have, and then I'll put together an application and send it over to you, and then you can send that off. So I do that. Also, happy to connect anybody with more traditional trademark law firms who go through and handle everything for you every step of the way if you have the budget for that and you want to go down that road.
So you said something that I think the consumer is not really familiar with, but I think other lawyers also might be interested in hearing a bit more. And that is, when I used to do incorporations and incorporate companies, okay, this is before the internet, you guys, this is before digital and LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and everything else. We actually would use an outside lawyer to prepare the incorporation documents. That's all he did. It was excellent work product. He was always on top of the latest laws, rules, and regulations, and we were able to provide our client with just an impeccable incorporation, right, or limited liability company. Am I correct in, so lawyers would reach out to you and hire you to help them with their clients' trademark needs. Is that a fair statement?
That's exactly right. I love that example because I've built this business that's all about trademark law all the time, and probably 85 or 90% of my clients are lawyers who have clients who are business owners who end up in interesting trademark situations. Somebody opens shop across the street from them and it has a confusingly similar name, and they're more of a general practice lawyer. They don't have all this nitty-gritty trademark law knowledge, day in and day out. They're just wondering, how do I solve this? How do I fix this situation, right? So then I'll come in, I'll do something like write a trademark infringement complaint that they can then go and file. And this is one of my favorite examples, actually. I wrote an infringement complaint. They filed it. Everybody, got into a room pretty quickly right after that, and they were able to resolve it and move forward, right? Lawyer doesn't have to send the client off to another lawyer. The business owner doesn't feel like they just have lawyers all over the place. That relationship gets to continue. I get to jump in and do this, nitty-gritty, interesting trademark law stuff that I do all the time, and it works out pretty well for everybody. I've had a really good time doing it.
And I'm glad we talked about that, because I don't think consumers are aware that a lot of law firms will farm out some of their task to experts. I encourage that. Rather than a lawyer trying to figure this out for the first time, he or she can reach out to someone like Stephen, who is an expert and knows what they're doing. Yeah. And for the lawyers, and I've got a lot of lawyers that are connected with me on social and digital, Stephen, I want them to know that they can reach out to you and a few other friends in our community. I think we have some mutual friends to help them with their trademark and intellectual property needs. A question came up about tattoos. Because we're seeing a lot of shows now.
I don't have any. Is that the question?
Yeah. So he's not going to show you his tattoos. I'm sorry. So, a lot of shows right now, reality shows, people with tats. So if you have someone on a reality TV show with a prominent tattoo of a company or something, I'm guessing there might be some trademark issues involved with the tattoos, if I'm not mistaken.
There definitely are. There are a lot of copyright issues with tattoos, especially
copyright. Okay.
Tattoos, especially in video games, really interesting. Like athletes will have tattoos and then they'll, reproduce the tattoo on the representation of the character in the game. And then all of a sudden, the tattoo artist or the athlete or whoever goes after them for that. And there's this really interesting question, so who has the rights and where'd they go, right?
So what's the protocol if I'm going to have you on my show and you've got a tattoo of your company name or a company name on your arm, or I do a video game with you as my main character, sounds to me like it's best to get all the consent forms in writing between all the parties, right?
Like, yeah, who did that? Are you on good terms with them? Do you have, something written up? Yeah, all that.
Interesting. What do you see happening over the next 5 to 10 years? Last question, when it comes to trademark rights, social media, digital, maybe virtual reality, augmented reality, what are you seeing happening right now in your industry with this area of the law that we might want to pay attention to over the next 5 to 10 years?
That is interesting. I don't have a great answer. I haven't seen much, which is sad because I'm really excited about VR, really excited about reality. I really don't know where it is. I'm here in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? And I don't have any more access to it than anybody else does. With Pokemon Go, several years ago, right? That was this big first moment where people were actually doing something with augmented reality. That felt like a tipping point where we were going to get into a place where it's more part of everyday life, but I still think it's far off. I mean, I haven't seen trademark issues about it, and I also just haven't, seen people using it day to day yet.
Well, imagine I've got a virtual reality game or presentation or office where I'm interviewing clients, right? In virtual reality, it's a real law firm. And I've got a Coca-Cola can sitting on my credenza behind me, or I've got some other, I've got the Four Seasons logo sitting behind me, and here I am interviewing clients. I'm wondering if that might be a potential intellectual
no, absolutely. You could have that same sort of source confusion, right? So
right. I mean, am I a lawyer for Four Seasons, or am I a lawyer for Four Seasons Landscaping? Because there's a difference.
Yeah. The landscaping company this week put out a Zoom background, which is like, okay, you can put up, you can look like you're Rudy Giuliani giving a speech in front of our landscaping company anytime you want to. And if you use that, or if, heaven forbid, you got on a Zoom call with somebody and you had, some kind of background behind you that was Coke or the Four Seasons Hotel or some other big brand, and you were, making a representation that you were something that you were not, absolutely, we're going to see
that could be a problem.
Opportunities for that. And also, that's the scary one is deepfake technology, right? Being able to put somebody else's face on your body or somebody's body and having them say things. I mean, that's just a whole can of worms in terms of rights of publicity and also source confusion issues and false advertising issues. I think we're going to see a lot of that play out in the next 5, 10, 20 years.
One thing we didn't mention is it's possible to trademark someone's name, correct?
It is absolutely possible to trademark someone's name. A lot of great trademark lawyers have registrations for their name for legal services.
Okay.
Pelton, like that.
So if you're, for example, this landscaping company, and you've got this image of the press conference that you're having some fun with, and you're using Rudy Giuliani's name without his permission, and if he has his name trademarked, that may or may not create some issues, correct?
Right, depending on what he has it trademarked for, what does he sell, et cetera, right?
Interesting.
Leah's comment here is amazing. I can predict making up names that don't make any sense. Hilariously, this is exactly what's happening at the trademark office right now. Most new trademark filings, for the first time recently, more trademark filings came from China than from the United States. And there are sort of a lot of different policy reasons why that's happening. One of the reasons is that local governments in China literally incentivize their citizens to apply and get to US trademark registrations. And it's this huge policy issue that nobody's figured out how to solve yet. And what they're doing is they're just stringing together, random sequences of letters like X, T, P, Y, Q into these unpronounceable words, which will get through as trademarks because nobody's ever, said this word before because it's not a word. It's just randomly generated, right? And they'll get through and they'll have this trademark registration. They get paid by the local government for doing it, but also a lot of them are Amazon sellers. And if you're selling on Amazon and you have a trademark registration, you get sort of these superpowers that you don't ordinarily have. You get to access something called the Amazon Brand Registry, which sort of gives you brand enforcement superpowers. So that's a huge problem, is that people are just making up these trademarks that aren't really brands that they're using for anything other than to get the registration. So that's something we're working through too.
And so that gives you an advantage on Amazon, like you described. What's the average cost for someone that's doing that with each of these names that they're applying for a trademark and securing a trademark? What are we looking at? A couple $100, couple $1,000?
I mean, if you apply on your own, you can skip basically everything other than the government fee, which is like $225 and up. Yeah. And if it goes through, that's it for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I love learning something new, and that's why I like doing these shows. And Stephen, this has been fun. I had a feeling that when we both started commenting about the Four Seasons Landscaping Press Conference, that there was going to be a show here. And I appreciate you for jumping on with me and answering everyone's questions. Did you guys all enjoy this interview today? I really did. Stephen, you've got a lot of fans out here. Everyone enjoyed the show. Connect with Stephen, you guys. I'll share the link in the show notes. Once again, this was Stephen Stanwood, trademark, property law, legal consulting, writing, technical writing, ghostwriting, and preparing trademarks for other good lawyers around the country. Stephen, I'm glad we connected on social media. Thanks for being my guest today.
Absolutely a pleasure, Mitch. Really appreciate the invite today.
It's my pleasure. You guys take care and make it a masterpiece. Bye-bye, everybody.